Hello everybody and welcome back to the Fortress of Solitude. Today we're going to be checking out Batman issue 149 by Chip Zdarsky, Michelle Bandini, Steve Lieber and Nick Filardi. In the wake of Zur's failed takeover of Gotham, Batman and Chip Zdarsky for that matter wrap up a lot of their leftover stories, to the point where it begins feeling like this is like Zdarsky's final issue. It's not, he's still continuing on the book, but it feels like the last issue a writer writes before he leaves a series. The entire issue is set around the Robin of Zur-En-Arrh, a clone of Bruce Wayne that Zur made to be his own version of Robin. Batman wastes no time tracking him down, but instead of fighting him, he recognizes the boy is lost, and like many of the other lost boys he has met over the years, he takes him in under his wing. It really does feel like Zdarsky wanted this to be a much longer story in the wake of the Zur story, as it's really a pared back one compared to the overall action-orientated plot of the Zur storyline. Bruce takes his younger counterpart home, and we learn that this clone has all of Bruce's memories, but Zur partitioned them off, and instead of remembering all of Bruce's memories, all he can remember is the death and the tragedy, so stuff like Crime Alley. Also, he would be more in line with Zur's mission. Bruce also finds a big problem, as the clone underwent accelerated aging to get him into fighting shape, but Zur had no way to stop it, and the boy is still aging quite rapidly. This is some great insight into Zur and his mission, as he saw the boy as disposable, just like all Robins are in his eyes, and Zdarsky perfectly shows the differences between Bruce and Zur, with Bruce having more humanity to him and instantly treating the clone as just a human being. While Bruce treats him well though, Damian on the other hand, and doesn't even want to have anything to do with him and instead want to deal with Failsafe, since the body Zur inhabited was carted off by the military, which is I guess how Waller gets a hold of him and explains why Zur is in absolute power, although it doesn't explain why it's Zur and not Failsafe, since they haven't really made that distinction really obvious to a lot of people, since maybe writers think that Zur and Failsafe are the same person when they're not. It's very confusing, and I'm intrigued to see how Mark Waid and some of the other writers are going to handle all of that stuff with Failsafe appearing in absolute power quite prominently. Damian's disdain for the clone is kind of funny because technically, as Bruce puts it in this very issue, technically Damian is a clone himself, since he was quote-unquote grown in a lab as well. And maybe it's just like Damian feeling a little off that he was beaten by this guy who is essentially his father, so he's more of a connection to Bruce than he has in a way, maybe? I don't know. Zdarsky has written Damian quite weirdly. This is probably much more in line with how Damian would think. He'd be very standoffish against someone who he could see taking his place more or less, even though that's not what his father would want anyway. But I could also see him believing that because that's exactly what Zur was going to do, and Zur is his father more or less. So I could see him being quite angry at Bruce and this clone because of that reason, and I can understand why he is doing the way he is, but he should have some understanding about what is happening as well. Again, this probably could have all been an interesting story to explore if the story of the clone hadn't come just literally last issue, where we found out that he was not a Robin or anything, that he was a clone. Bruce decides to try and help the clone's aging problem and sets out with Tim to one of Zur's old labs in a hidden forest. This gives Bruce and Tim a chance to properly chat, and also for Tim to keep an eye on Bruce, since Bruce believes that Zur could still trigger again within his mind and take over him. As has been a through line of the story, Bruce has been letting his family in and help him for a change, and I love that Tim reiterates that to Bruce, reminding him that he is only human after all, and it's okay to have doubts, as that's something human, that's something everyone has. The clone meanwhile continues to age, and he and Bruce share a moment once Bruce gets back from the Zur cave, where Bruce tells him about his robotic hand, something that the clone can't remember since it happened after Zur gave him his memories. It spurs on a conversation about Bruce's mortality and how he is only a man, he is just a guy in a costume. And I like that Bruce has come to terms that finding ways around it is not right, and that's be it robot bodies, clones, or other things. And I like that he's just starting to figure that out, that time is time and you can't really beat that. Their conversation turns to fear as well, as the clone begins feeling fear as he grows older, and he has a fear that he won't be able to make his own memories. This makes Bruce pretty desperate to try and find a solution to this, and it's really compelling as well. And Zdarsky has written a fantastic, vulnerable Batman who can't just solve a problem instantly. He doesn't have, some technology hidden away that he made years ago that he can just bring out and it'll fix everything. Bruce does figure out that he needs better technology, and he figures that maybe Xur has something that could help, and he heads to Wayne Enterprises, following a vision from Xur's memories that are still rattling around in his head, and he ends up finding that Xur himself had quite a fortune, and that's how he was bankrolling, all the various labs and caves and all this sort of stuff he had. And Bruce gets access to that, and thus brings Bruce back into the billionaire club. Bruce now has his money back, or at least more money than he had before, and I was genuinely surprised, since Bruce has been without, his billions and billions of dollars for a very long time. But I guess it had to come back at some point, and it's a smart way to do it. Taking the money that Xur was using to commit evil and use it to commit heroisms. Bruce rushes back home to help the clone, only to find that he has aged even more, and more so, he has cut off his own hand, just like Bruce did. We learn he did this so Bruce can get his hand back and he would have something to help in his studies of the clone. It is a little unclear if the clone did cut it off the hand to give back to Bruce so he could reattach it to his own, but since Bruce is seen with a normal hand from here on out, I assume it was grafted on to himself after he fixed the aging process. Eventually, as Dick and Mr. Terrific arrive though, it's a little too late, as the clone has now aged into an old man and will die very soon. Bruce decides his final moments shouldn't be in an underground lab, so he takes the clone back to Wayne Manor to see the graves of his parents and Alfred. Zdarsky uses this wonderful, beautiful moment to impart some wisdom into Bruce one final time, as with his dying breath, the clone tells Bruce that a home isn't a home because it's some big old manor or a brownstone. Home is the people around you. And Bruce, thanks to opening his home to the various Robins and Batgirls and everyone, he has given that clone some very good memories, memories of home. And most importantly, it allowed Bruce a chance to fulfill his mission and to help those who needed help and also be helped himself. After the clone passes away, Bruce gets right back into the saddle as Batman, confronting the new commissioner Vandal Savage, who wants to make a deal with Batman, telling him that he'll give him back the cave and manor if Batman does a favor for him every now and then. But thanks to his new development, Bruce is not interested in any manor and tells Vandal to keep it after punching him in the face and destroying the bat signal. Zdarsky didn't really do much with Vandal's plot at all, and I feel like this was just kind of left on his doorstep just because Vandal was a big part of Gotham War, so he kind of just had the character around, just kind of had to do something with them, and it would have fit perfectly in a story that happened after the Xur stuff. You could have just gone straight into a story with Vandal coming in to a city now vulnerable and, enacting a plan to take over the government of the city or something. There's the seeds there, but cramming it all together into the Xur storyline just felt like too many wheels turning at once. Chip then spends the last couple of pages of the book drastically changing the status quo of the Bat family, as they are all brought together at a specific location, which they later find out is the Lohmuller Mansion, the same mansion that he fought Joker in a few issues back, and he plans on doing it up along with many of the other buildings in Old Gotham, wanting to revitalize the entire district, and to do that, he believes the Bat family should live in the city they protect, not in some old mansion on the outskirts. He reveals that the name of the house will be the Pennyworth Manor, named after the man who would always bring the family together. So many times through the years we've seen stories of the family working in the city or buying up parts of the city to revitalize, whether it be through, Wayne Enterprises or something, and it always goes to shit, both in a writing sense in that the writer just kind of forgets that plotline or just doesn't care about it all that much and just lets it languish, doesn't do anything with it, or the villain of the story that plot point is part of ends up targeting that and destroying it or ruining it in some sort of way. I really do hope that this time is a little bit different, but I'm not really holding my breath, since all it takes is the writer after Zdarsky or Zdarsky himself to just undo it in just a matter of a couple of issues. But it would be nice to see, Gotham actually change for once and actually change into something other than a haven for criminals. Bruce continues to renovate the old building and even brings the clone's body to bury on the land, which is when he's visited by Selina Selina, and the two catch up, reuniting over the fact that their lives can get ridiculous sometimes. Like what Zdarsky did with Jason in the last couple of issues, this feels like an apology for Gotham War, as both are kind of waved away their actions in that event, and none more so than Bruce and Selina here, where they basically just catch up with each other and be like, no hard feelings about what happened, it's all good. And it even ends with Bruce inviting Selina back into her home and symbolically bringing her back into the family as well. I don't know how to feel about that, because again, it goes very much like how he's planning on revitalizing the city. This could just be something that happens with Zdarsky, no other writer references it or anything, and then like whoever comes in after Zdarsky could easily just split the family back up, split, Gotham back up, split Catwoman and Batman up, So it doesn't really feel like these are things that we should be doing, especially when those things are just going to get changed very, very quickly. And it's also really weird that it's happening right now, since, as I said at the top of this review, this feels like a final issue from Chip Zdarsky. And hey, maybe it is. Maybe after all the tie-ins with Absolute Power, he's done with the book, and this is technically his last, normal Batman book. Who knows? I guess we'll find out after Absolute Power wraps up in a couple of months what's going on. But yeah, this feels like a final issue. Batman issue 149 had some really great story beats and covered some really important story things that I didn't think that Chip Zdarsky would be getting to before we go into Absolute Power next issue. I adored all the stuff he did with the clone, especially when I was really worried how they were going to handle that, whether they were going to handle that or just wave it away as that didn't really happen. But I'm so glad he got to tell the story he got to tell with that clone, and also used it to reinforce Bruce's journey to becoming more open to his family, helping him, and being more of a human character, not the Batman constantly. That being said, some of the status quo changes, especially towards the end of the issue with the new banner and Selina being back in the family, that all feels like stuff that's just going to get waved away or not even dealt with at all, and it just feels like it's status quo changing for the sake of status quo changing, which is very strange because it feels like, again, a final issue from a writer before a new writer comes in. That's not the case here. So I guess I'll see what Zdarsky has in store for Gotham, the Alfred Pennyworth Manor, and Batman and Catwoman after Absolute Power. I'm going to give this issue an 8 out of 10.